In this video, it's Aussie Ute time again. This time, it's the sportier, more practical version of my own Ford Fairmont AU. This is an XR8 Ute. Yes, it's a performance pickup, people, and it looks absolutely amazing. Those of you who are used to my own AU will immediately spot the entirely different front end with the circular headlamps. There's a bit of Toyota Celica there, perhaps even some Kias if you're being a little unkind, but you can still see the shape where the original AU headlamps would be. It's a really sporty thing, very, very smart. This one's got the gorgeous Tickford alloys. This isn't a factory XR8, but Ford did build them. This one was actually converted. It used to be a 4-litre straight six, like my Fairmont, but it ran on LPG. But it's since been converted using a sadly rotten XR8 that had somehow found its way to this side of the world, and all the running gear has been put into this Ute. Slightly different in some regards though. The Utes still use leaf springs, so it's a live rear axle. I think it's got a limited slip diff. It certainly really needs one. Unlike the Holden Utes, the Fords stayed loyal to a chassis cab layout. The Holdens were monocoque. They had a payload of only about 640 kilograms, but with the chassis cab on these Ford Utes, they were able to carry up to a ton on the back, and they can tow 2.3 tons with electronic braking, which is something they have in Australia and also America. We don't see it in Europe. But yeah, I think it's an absolutely beautiful thing. It's absolutely enormous. It confuses the absolute heck out of everyone. No one knows what it is. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how it drives compared to my own AU. So yeah, not the sort of test you expect to see here in the UK, is it? Australian Fords. But let's take you around. We'll have a poke under the bonnet first of all, because that's where the differences start after all. Inside, very much the same as mine, but you've got the XR8 dash binnacle Tickford tuned, no less. So that's all the good times. Slightly better condition than mine, it must be said. Probably hasn't done 315,000 kilometers. And yeah, there is the main difference. Same expansion bottle, same air filter, it looks like, but this is the Windsor 5-litre overhead valve V8 engine. Much more space in front of the engine, because of course it's only 4 cylinders long effectively. I forget how much power, but that's kind of irrelevant anyway, because I believe this has got a performance ECU on it, so it has even more than it would have done initially, but makes all the right noises as well. I'm just going to put the window down, because I never trust a car with central locking. So we shall insert the key, ignition on, window down. Ooh, different switches, and all of the blubs going on. Isn't that nice? Whoa. These bars came over from Australia in bits, were then reassembled. I really like them. They look really, really smart. And yeah, there's your V8. I can't pull anything because it's all electronically controlled, but if we go and give it a bit of a tickle on the old throttle pedal. Yeah, she's potent. I don't know if we can have a peek under the tonneau. It's a lot of work to get it off, but oh yeah, it's full of stuff. But that is the fuel tank back there. He's had a custom fuel tank made because he couldn't get one sent over from Australia. All sorts of issues. It's not clean enough, blah blah blah. I think it might even be full of rubble because he actually uses it as a working vehicle, which I think is just absolutely awesome. So yeah, we'll go for a drive. I haven't got very much time today, sadly. Gonna get all the way back to Wales, and yeah, we shall see what it drives like. Well, this should be fun. I've driven a couple of Holden Utes, a VY with the old ex-Buick V6, and I also drove an HSV Maloo, HSV being the performance arm of Holden, which had an LS V8 and 412 brake horsepower, I think it was. Oh yeah, it sounds very different. And I imagine I'm going to have to tickle the throttler. It's going to light the tyres up very easily, I suspect. Oh yes. Oh, Betty doesn't do that. Betty being my Ford AU Fairmont. But I drove around New Zealand and then imported to the UK. So lovely. This is the earlier dashboard style, so I've not actually seen this before. That's quite interesting. The ride is a little on the firm side. The front springs as well as the rears seem quite firm. Oh yeah, that noise. Oh yeah. So the Ford AU was launched in 1998, and yeah, it was a car that caused some controversy. People really couldn't get on board with the looks. But for my money, the AU Utes have always been a thing of beauty. I even like the early ones with the waterfall grille that everyone says is absolutely disgusting. Not to me. But yeah, the owner says, much like I get, people don't actually know what it is. They assume it's a South African P100, and you're just like, no, no, very much not. But yeah, the words of the owner are writ large in my mind, but it will try to kill you. So it's a really greasy day. The roads are so wet. I'm gonna have to do my window up with much regret. So we can't go giving it the beans all the time, but I will see if we can extend her a little bit. But yeah, nice to drive the Ute version. It all feels so familiar yet so different. It's I look around and there's a camera right there attached to the rear window. I really like Utes. I loved driving around Melbourne in a VY. Huge thanks to Andrew for making that possible while I was over there. He loaned it me to drive around in, and it was lovely. We're not used to having torque, so even the 4-litre straight 6 that would normally be under the bonnet of one of these has something like 357 newton meters of torque. This must be well over 400, I imagine. The brakes feel a little more positive than my AU. Might be time for me to do some upgrading. Windscreen wiper test, much the same as my AU. It's a good pattern, good overlap, no triangular doom. Unlike most Fords of this era. Oh yes. Oh, that is a lot of fun. Oh, that's a heck of a blind spot. There is no over the shoulder, so I'm having to have a good old look about in the rearview mirror. Oh wow, that wasn't even trying, and that was brisk. So the Fords were very much the functional workhorse of the Ute family, but the XR8 versions prove you can still have plenty of fun in your workday truck. I mean, it just seems ludicrous to us, the idea of having a V8 powered pickup truck as your daily workhorse, but I love that this still is a workhorse. It's one of the most beautiful workhorses I've ever seen. Although the HSV Maloo I drove, that was also a workhorse. That was full of building stuff in the back. But yeah, even driving in a straight line on drying roads, you're aware that this could definitely get away from you quite quickly. But yeah, that ride is crashy and firm, but must be said, more composed than my Fairmont. I think my Fairmont might be due a bit of suspension work. Yeah, I wanted to drive an AU Ute for a long time. I didn't manage it on the New Zealand-Australia trip, and I was gutted for pretty much the entire time I was there. I so wanted to. But here we are, finally doing it. Oh, I can confirm the air conditioning works very, very well. It's not digital like in my Fairmont. Fairmont's, you know, that much more plush. But it's certainly hauling cold air at me, very respectfully. It feels so much older, this interior than mine, I think. But like I say, this is a slightly earlier example. Oh wow, that noise. Again, I'm still barely squeezing the throttle, really. Oh wow. That is a noise and a half. I don't know what sort of exhaust is got on here. I imagine it's custom built because you just can't get exhaust parts over here. But by heck. That puts my silencer delete on my Fairmont into, yeah, it doesn't sound quite so impressive anymore. But the Ford Utes remained all the way through to the end of Falcon production. It was 2016, I think. That is just hilarious. It's not actually devastatingly fast, but the noise, oh my gosh, that's like ripping cloth. Oh, I think I'd like one of these. You think if I got one of these I could turn it into a tuk transporter? That'd be awesome, wouldn't it? So for those who aren't aware, the Falcon AU on which this is based is part of a long line of Australian Fords. Ford began selling the Falcons in Australia in the 60s, and they were just American ones, but they quickly found they weren't hardy enough for Australian conditions. Extreme heat, lots of dirt roads, they would literally fall apart. So Falcons developed their own way in Australia, unique to Australia. And when it came to the AU, Ford, as a global parent, was thinking, well, could we take an American car? Could we take a European car over there, one of our existing Fords from elsewhere, and would it be okay? But Ford Australia were vehement that they had to go their own way. And it's a bit of a shame, because the looks did put people off. They still sold relatively strong numbers, but the Commodore was the one. That's the one that sold in the most numbers. So the AU had its edges knocked off, was refined into the BA, which had a look much closer to some European Fords, I think. And indeed, the very last Falcon of them all looked an awful lot like a Mondeo. I haven't got modes on this gearbox. I've got an eco mode, hilariously, in my AU. It's not about the power, it's about the hilarity of the noise. Oh, that is absolutely hilarious. So there you go, that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour around a car I want to take home with me, frankly. Although, actually, I think my Fairmont wins for comfort overall, especially in the seating and the suspension department. But wow, that's amazing. I'm so glad to finally get to try one, and one with a proper engine in it as well. Much as I love the AU's straight six engine, that is proper noise, even when you're just pottering around. Marvellous. So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget you can head to the Hubnut store, where we even have some AU merch, and I'll see you in a future video. Farewell. It's a Ford, Jim, but not as we know it.